All right, let's get right into it. When you hear the name Martin Luther, you probably think of the Reformation, right? Nailing those theses to the church door. But underneath all that action was this revolutionary operating system for theology. It was a completely new way of seeing how God actually connects with us in our world. So in this explainer, we're going to pull back the curtain on that system and really focus on one big question. How does God speak?
And it all kicks off with this quote right here. Now I know two kinds of righteousness sounds super academic, maybe a little dry, but trust me on this. This idea is the master key. It unlocks pretty much everything else in Luther's thinking. It gets right to the heart of that nagging anxiety of his time. Man, let's be real, of our time too. That question, am I actually good enough?
So here's the game plan. We'll start with the huge question that kicked all this off. Then we'll break down those two kinds of righteousness. After that, we'll see how God's word isn't just some old text, but an active, creative power. We'll look at how that power actually becomes something we can touch. And finally, what it really means to live your life inside this ongoing conversation with God.
Okay, first up, to really get why Luther's answer was so brilliant, you have to feel the weight of the question he was dealing with. I mean, this wasn't just some theological brain teaser. It was a deep, personal, soul-crushing crisis for pretty much everyone.
This was it. This was the question. If God is perfect and we are, well, not, how do we ever bridge that gap? How could anything we do in our messy, complicated lives ever be enough to make us right with a holy God? The answers people were getting at the time felt like being on an impossible spiritual treadmill you could never get off of. Luther's big breakthrough was to just reframe the whole problem.
And that leads us straight to his incredible solution. This is the idea that just changes the whole game. See, Luther realized we weren't dealing with one giant problem, but two totally different relationships. And these relationships needed two totally different kinds of righteousness. Nailing this distinction is, no exaggeration, the foundation for everything else.
First, you've got our standing coram Deo. That's just Latin for before God. In this relationship, our righteousness is completely 100% passive. Think of it like this. Our hands are wide open, just receiving a gift. This is nothing we earn, nothing we achieve. It's the perfect righteousness of Christ handed to us freely that we just receive through faith. That's it.
But then there's our life coram mundo, before the world. This is where our active righteousness gets to shine. This is the world of our families, our jobs, our communities. Here, because we're already secure in our standing before God, we get to become agents of good, actively loving our neighbors and taking care of the world.
This chart just lays it out so clearly. Passive righteousness, that's vertical. It's all about you and God, and it's based entirely on what Christ did for you. Active righteousness, that's horizontal. It's about you and your neighbor, and it's based on what you do for them. Now here's the crucial part. You need both, but you can never, ever mix them up. One saves your soul, the other is how you live out that salvation.
So how is this passive righteousness even possible? Luther called it the joyous exchange. It's this beautiful, incredible idea. Christ takes all our junk, our sin, our failures, our mess, onto himself. And in return, he gives us his perfect record, his righteousness, his life. It's a total swap. We become right before God, not because of who we are, but because of who Christ is for us.
Okay, so we figured out what God gives us, this incredible gift of righteousness. But the next big question is, how? How does he actually deliver it? For Luther, the answer was simple and profound. He delivers it through his word. And you have to understand, for Luther, God's word isn't just information on a page. It's a live wire. It's the very power of God in action.
I love this quote from his lectures on Genesis. It just says it all. When God speaks, stuff happens. His word doesn't just describe what is, it creates what is. I mean, he spoke, and the entire universe popped into existence. And that very same powerful, creative word is what he uses to save us and make us new.
You can really break it down into three jobs. First, there's the creative word that gets everything started from nothing. Then you have the preserving word that, keeps the lights on and holds everything together day by day. And then, and this is the one that changes everything for us, there's the recreative word. That's the gospel. It's the promise that crashes into our brokenness and literally creates new life where there was only sin and death. Which, of course, leads to the next big question, right? Okay, so God's word is this amazing recreative force. That's great, but how does it get from out there in the spiritual realm to right here, to us in our physical world? How does that gap get bridged?
And Luther's answer here is so beautiful because it's so earthy, so grounded. He basically said that God, who created this physical world, actually loves using physical things to deliver his spiritual gifts. He doesn't just yell from heaven. He gives us a word we can actually hear with our ears and see with our eyes and even touch with our hands. In fact, he pointed to 5 main delivery systems for the gospel. You've got preaching from a pulpit, the actual water of baptism, the bread and wine of the Lord's Supper, a personal word of forgiveness, which he called absolution, and even just the encouraging conversation between 2 believers. In every single one, God attaches his powerful promise to something real and tangible.
Baptism is the perfect example of this. Look, plain old water is just wet. It can't save anybody. But Luther says when you take that simple, physical water and you combine it with God's powerful word of promise, suddenly it becomes what he called a life-giving water, rich in grace, that actually creates a new birth in a person.
The exact same logic applies to the Lord's Supper. It's not just a snack of bread and wine. It's those simple, everyday things connected to Christ's powerful promise. This is my body, this is my blood, given for you. And through that physical meal, the real benefits of what Jesus did on the cross are delivered right to you.
So if God is constantly speaking, constantly reaching out to us through all these different ways, what does our side of the conversation look like? How are we supposed to live in this reality? Well, Luther gave a really practical, down-to-earth guide for how to actually engage with God's Word.
He laid out this 3-step process. You start with prayer, just asking God to open your eyes to what he wants to show you. Then comes meditation. That's where you really chew on the text, reading it over and over to let it sink in. And then there's this 3rd step we usually skip, trial, or in German, Anfechtung. This is where the rubber meets the road. It's about experiencing God's word as true and powerful right in the middle of your real-life struggles, your doubts, your fears. That's when theology stops being an idea and becomes a lifeline.
And what happens when you really hear God speaking to you? Well, the most natural thing in the world is that you speak back. For Luther, prayer wasn't some stuffy religious chore. It's the confident, bold, sometimes messy conversation of a child who knows they are loved, talking to their father about absolutely everything.
But, and this is a huge but, we have to be clear, this conversation doesn't happen in a quiet, peaceful garden. Luther was really clear that the Christian life is a battle. It's a constant struggle fought under the cross, where we're getting hit from all sides by the world, by the devil, and by our own internal junk. And in that fight, God's active, living word is our only real weapon and our only true comfort.
So let's just quickly recap the big ideas here. First, our identity has 2 parts. We are passive receivers before God, which then frees us to be active lovers of people in the world. Second, God's word isn't just dead text, it's a living, active power that creates and renews. And third, God actually loves using physical stuff, water, bread, wine, our voices, to deliver his spiritual, life-saving grace to us.
And that leaves us with one final, pretty challenging thought. If Luther's right about all this, if God isn't some silent, far-off being, but a person who is actively speaking all the time through a sermon, through water, through a meal, through a friend, what does that mean for us right now? If we actually tuned our ears to listen, what incredible conversations might we be missing out on every single